Hi, I'm Patrick from Last Records, and today I'm going over deaths so unbelievably silly they sound made up until you find out they're actually real. From a dude who put a fireworks tube on his head at a party, to a grown man who got stuck in a baby swing at a playground, which went brutally wrong in every way possible. It was July 4th, 2019, and the smell of charcoal and gunpowder mixed in the humid night air above a fenced backyard in southern Louisiana, where a row of spent fireworks tubes lined the edge of a concrete patio, and a portable speaker rattled with music turned up loud enough to hear from the street. Garrett Lambertz was 27 years old and worked as a tile installer for a small residential contractor based outside Baton Rouge. Broad-shouldered and sunburned year-round, he spent his days setting bathroom floors and kitchen backsplashes in subdivision homes. Friends described him as the guy who turned every single gathering into a performance. Not because he was trying too hard or anything, he just genuinely could not let a moment pass without making someone laugh. On this particular night, friends said he had already done a cannonball into the above-ground pool that sent a wave across the deck and soaked the grill, wrapped himself in a flag like a toga, and tried to light 2 sparklers using only his bare feet. 3 bits in one night, and the dude was already hunting for a 4th. Like the funniest guy at the party genuinely never knows when the bit has gone too far, and that's kinda what wrecks me about this one. The party had been going since late afternoon, like 20-something people in the backyard. The host had been launching consumer fireworks from the far end of the yard all evening. By around 10 o'clock, the launches wound down, and several mortar tubes sat upright on the grass, blackened and scorched. Nobody had bothered counting how many shells actually got fired versus how many came in the kit. Garrett walked over to the row of mortar tubes. Witnesses later said he picked one up from beside the others, apparently assuming it had already been fired earlier in the night. He held it vertically against the top of his head while leaning toward the group and mugging for the camera. A bunch of people laughed. One friend raised a phone to record. A friend near the fire pit said he yelled at Garrett to put it down, but like he was laughing the whole time he said it. So it didn't exactly land as a serious warning. Like, I want you to tell me how in the world you're supposed to take that warning seriously when the guy saying it is basically dying, laughing himself. The shell detonated inside the tube while it sat on his head. The blast was instant, like this concussive flash, and a sharp bang that witnesses said was way louder and totally different from anything they heard all night. Garrett dropped straight to the ground. The tube burst apart. Guests nearest to him froze, several later telling investigators they thought it was part of the act for a split second before the severity of his injuries became immediately obvious. 2 guests with first aid experience reached him within seconds. He was unresponsive with catastrophic visible injuries. Someone called 911 right away, and paramedics got there in about 14 minutes. Garrett was transported to a regional trauma center and pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be catastrophic craniofacial trauma, including skull fractures, severe traumatic brain injury, and soft tissue destruction from the detonation. Investigators later determined the mortar had misfired earlier in the night, leaving a live shell still sitting inside the tube without anyone realizing it. In the dark, with dozens of scorched tubes scattered around the yard, the tube appeared spent just like the others. The blast also damaged patio furniture and shattered part of the host's sliding glass door. The fire marshal's office put out a reminder about the dangers of handling spent fireworks. The homeowner later found out that parts of the damage weren't even covered by his insurance. Garrett's co-workers at the contracting company placed a decal of his initials on the work truck he had driven. This next one is the story from this video I've had the hardest time explaining to people, because when I tell them what happened, they laugh, and then I tell them how it ended, and they stop. It was September 22nd, 2018, and the last warm weekend of the season had drawn a steady crowd to an outdoor farmer's market in a converted parking lot on the outskirts of Raleigh, North Carolina, where white canvas vendor tents lined both sides of a central walkway, and the smell of kettle corn drifted over wooden crates of late-harvest squash and bundled flowers. Daria Polienko was 34 years old and worked as a receptionist at a dental office in a suburban strip mall, handling scheduling and insurance stuff. Outside of work, she was pretty quiet and routine-oriented. Weekday lunches packed the night before, same parking spot at the grocery store, that kind of thing. Her one visible quirk, according to her sister Alla, was her extreme aversion to stinging insects. Alla later said it went way beyond normal discomfort. Daria would literally cross whole streets in summer just to avoid outdoor garbage cans where bees liked to hang around. A single wasp near a restaurant patio meant she was eating inside, no discussion. She had once abandoned a full grocery cart in a parking lot and sat in her car for 20 minutes because a yellow jacket landed on the handle. A full cart of groceries just abandoned in a parking lot for 20 minutes over one single yellow jacket. And I know how ridiculous that sounds, but you seriously need to hear the rest of this. That morning, Daria and Alla got to the market shortly after it opened. They walked through the vendor rows pretty casually, stopping at produce stands and a honey vendor near the middle of the lot. Alla later said they had been there about 40 minutes when they paused near a flower stand at the lot's eastern edge, maybe 30 feet from the vehicle access lane. A single yellow jacket landed on Daria's bare forearm. Alla saw it first and reached to brush it away. Before her hand made contact, Daria looked down, saw the yellow jacket crawling against her skin, jerked her arm back, slapped at it, and bolted. She didn't stop after the swat. Alla basically described it as instant and total. Daria just dropped the tomatoes and took off from the flower stand without looking anywhere. The flower stand and vendor tents blocked most of the access lane from view, and her path carried her straight out from between them into the truck route. A refrigerated delivery truck was coming into the lot through the access lane at roughly 10 miles per hour. The driver later told investigators the flower stand and vendor tents blocked his view until Daria suddenly appeared from between them, running full speed. He hit the brakes immediately. She showed up less than 20 feet in front of him, and there was just no time. The bumper struck Daria before the truck came to a stop. She fell beneath the front corner of the truck before it stopped. Alla, who had followed a few steps behind, started screaming. Bystanders rushed over, and a vendor with EMT training got to Daria within about a minute. She was unresponsive. Emergency services arrived within 9 minutes. Daria was transported in critical condition and pronounced dead shortly afterward. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be severe blunt force trauma to the head and torso. The driver was not cited. Investigators confirmed the truck was within the speed limit and concluded there was little opportunity to avoid it. One insect, a truck doing maybe 10 miles an hour and like 30 feet of distance. 10 miles an hour doesn't even sound dangerous. And honestly, it took me a while to wrap my head around how that ended someone's life at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning. The following season, the market introduced barriers and separated delivery access from pedestrian lanes. Alla did a brief interview with a local news outlet where she talked about her sister's lifelong phobia and said she had been telling Daria for years to get help for it. No civil action was filed. All right, so this next one hit me differently because there was no malfunction, no fault, no one to blame except a 23-year-old who saw something that cost €12 hit the water and just went after it. It was June 8th, 2017, and bright midday sun beat down on a flooded limestone quarry in rural County Galway, Ireland, where pale rock walls dropped straight into dark blue-green water, and a rusted chain-link fence along the upper rim sagged in several places where sections had been bent back by years of trespassers. Cillian Devereux was 23 years old and worked as an apprentice electrician with a small firm in the county. Co-workers described him as impulsive in a cheerful way, always first to volunteer for something and last to think it through. His one prized possession was a pair of cheap plastic aviator sunglasses from a petrol station, bought during a weekend road trip to Kerry with his girlfriend. They cost €12. He wore them every day, pushed up on his forehead even indoors. His girlfriend said he just refused to buy another pair because he liked those ones. €12, which is like $13. Just hold on to that number for me because it's gonna matter. That afternoon, Cillian and two co-workers had driven to the quarry after a half-day job. The place had been shut down for over a decade and was technically off limits, but like people swam there all the time anyway. The water sat about 30 feet below the rim with natural ledges at different heights, and the depth near the walls was over 40 feet. No life-saving equipment anywhere. Cillian and his co-workers had been jumping from a ledge about 10 feet above the water for roughly an hour. He had just climbed back up and was standing near the edge shaking water from his hair when the aviators slipped off his forehead and tumbled down into the quarry. They hit the surface and floated roughly 6 feet from the wall. His co-workers later said there was zero hesitation. He looked down, said something about his sunglasses, and jumped feet first directly after them. It wasn't a controlled dive or anything. He pretty much just launched himself outward and dropped 10 feet into the water at a weird angle. He went fully under when he entered. When he came back up, his movements were completely different from before. Arms stiff, gasping loud enough to hear from the ledge, strokes short and uncoordinated, with his head barely staying above the surface. One co-worker on the ledge shouted his name. The other started climbing down toward the water. Cillian managed roughly 3 strokes before his head dipped below the surface. He came back up once, arms no longer stroking, then slipped under again and did not reappear. One co-worker jumped in and dove over and over, but couldn't find him. The other ran toward the road while calling emergency services. Crews arrived within 25 minutes. Cillian's body was recovered about 90 minutes later from around 35 feet down. The sunglasses were found still floating near the wall. Like, how do you even begin to explain to his girlfriend that he's gone over something she could have replaced at any petrol station for €12? That's the part I can't make sense of. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be drowning, with cold water shock listed as a significant contributing factor. Surface water temperature was around 50 degrees, cold enough to trigger an involuntary gasp reflex the second you go under, and investigators believed that combined with panic is what got him. The county council put up permanent fencing with anti-climb features and posted warning signs about water temperature and depth. His girlfriend's tribute post, a photo of him wearing the sunglasses on the Kerry trip, got shared pretty widely across Irish social media. This next one happened at a wedding, which is part of why it's in this video, because the distance between what that day was supposed to be and how it ended is something I couldn't get out of my head. It was April 11th, 2016, and a light breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut hay across a private ranch property outside Fredericksburg, Texas, where a wooden arch wound with white fabric and wildflowers stood at the edge of a mowed clearing, and roughly 60 folding chairs faced a small raised platform beneath a stand of live oaks. Aldrich Mason was 42 years old and worked as a regional sales manager for a building materials distributor based in San Antonio. Tall and broad, firm handshake kind of guy, he had built his whole career on walk-in confidence, just showing up to job sites unannounced and leaving with a signed order more often than not. His wife later said he was the kind of person who put furniture together without instructions, waved off the waiter when they said the plate was hot, and told the dentist he didn't need numbing. He just figured he could handle anything on the spot. The wedding was for a college friend of Aldrich's wife. The ceremony had wrapped up like an hour before, and everyone was kinda just hanging around in cocktail hour. A chestnut quarter horse belonging to the property owner had been brought out for photographs near the wooden arch. A ranch hand held the horse by a lead rope, and guests had been posing beside the animal's head and shoulder. The ranch hand said the horse was used to events, but he had kept himself positioned to keep guests to the front. Aldrich had watched several couples take photos beside the horse from the front. His wife said he leaned over and told her he wanted a different kind of photo, something like him pretending to swing up onto the horse's back from behind like a cowboy. She told him not to. The ranch hand had loosened his grip on the lead while turning to answer a question from the property owner. Every other guest took the photo from the front, like every single one of them. And when I look at that, all I can think is the safe version of this picture was right there the whole time, but he wanted the funnier one. Aldrich approached the horse from directly behind. He reached both arms up toward the animal's back. The horse's ears flattened. Its hindquarters shifted. The kick was instantaneous. The horse's left rear hoof caught Aldrich square in the center of his chest. The impact knocked him violently backward off his feet. He landed on his back about 5 feet away and did not move. Several guests screamed. An off-duty paramedic reached him within a minute and began emergency care. Someone called 911 right away. Paramedics arrived within 18 minutes. Aldrich was airlifted to a regional trauma center and pronounced dead less than an hour after the kick. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force chest trauma, resulting in multiple rib fractures, a cardiac contusion, and severe internal chest injuries. The force behind the kick was consistent with a full rear leg strike from a quarter horse at close range, and the injuries were considered unsurvivable. What I can't get past is his wife told him not to, like she literally said, "Don't do that," and he walked over there anyway, and that was it. The property owner stopped bringing horses to private events after that. The wedding photographer's images, which caught Aldrich approaching the horse from behind, were included in the incident documentation. No legal action was filed. So this next one is the one I almost didn't include. Not because it isn't silly, but because the gap between how it sounds and how it ended is wider than anything else in this video. A grown man died stuck in a baby swing. It was October 24th, 2014, and the air had turned cool enough for jackets in a residential neighborhood on the north side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where a small park sat between 2 blocks of older homes with its playground equipment visible from the street under amber sodium lights. Brennan Thibault was 31 years old and worked as an HVAC technician for a family-owned company in the greater Milwaukee area. Stocky and strong, he had the grip strength that came from years of torquing fittings in crawl spaces. His friends described him as the kind of person who could not be made to quit anything. He once held a plank for 4 straight minutes at a company picnic until his arms were shaking, and finished a ghost pepper wing at a challenge night, just sitting there turning red rather than grab the milk. Once he committed to something, his pride just locked in. That evening, Brennan and 3 friends had spent several hours at a nearby bar where he had been drinking pretty heavily. He was slurring and not exactly steady on his feet by the time they left. They were walking through the neighborhood when they passed the park. One of them jogged toward the swing set, which had 2 regular belt swings and 1 toddler bucket swing, the molded plastic kind with leg holes and a high back, made for little kids. The dare was barely even a dare. One friend said something about Brennan fitting inside it. Friends later said it was almost unnecessary because Brennan was already walking toward it. He grabbed the chains, turned around, and lowered himself in. His thighs pushed through the leg holes, and his hips sank into the bucket. For a second it held. He sat there grinning at his friends. Then his weight settled, and the plastic gripped his upper thighs like a vice. He tried pushing himself up by the chains, but his body did not move. His friends gathered around, laughing. One grabbed him under the arms and pulled. Nothing. Another tried pushing the plastic outward, but it just flexed and wouldn't let go. Brennan was laughing too, telling them to try harder, insisting he was fine at first, even though his voice had already dropped a bit. If someone told me this story without any context, I genuinely would not believe it. That's how ridiculous the whole thing sounds, and yet here I am having to tell you it actually happened. One friend called 911, still laughing when the dispatcher picked up. A fire crew was dispatched with cutting tools. The position he was in, knees forced sharply up toward his chest with his torso folded forward, meant his full weight was pressing his abdomen straight into his diaphragm, so his lungs basically couldn't expand all the way. Every breath he took was a little smaller than the last, and the alcohol in his system was slowing his body's ability to respond to the oxygen drop. At first, Brennan was still cracking jokes, but within a few minutes, his breathing got noticeably labored. Shorter breaths, more effort, less air getting in each time. He started swearing and trying to force himself up against the chains, but the seat held him, and every time he strained, he burned through more oxygen. Witnesses said he just kind of ran out of steam. His movements got slower and weaker. He stopped answering when people talked to him, and eventually, his head dropped forward against the chains. The fire crew arrived roughly 12 minutes after the call. Brennan was unresponsive and not breathing. Firefighters cut the swing off the frame and got him free within about 3 minutes, started resuscitation right there on the ground. He was transported to a nearby emergency department, where he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be positional asphyxia, compounded by acute alcohol intoxication, with toxicology showing a blood alcohol level well above the legal driving limit. Basically, the way he was sitting just slowly cut off his breathing, and being that hammered meant he genuinely couldn't tell what was happening or get himself out. Those three friends were standing right there the whole time, and not one of them could tell you the exact moment it stopped being funny. And honestly, that's what haunts me about this one. The Park District inspected similar playground equipment across the city following the incident. Brennan's co-workers left a hard hat and a set of channel locks on the bench outside the shop the morning after his funeral. I picked this next one because out of everything in this video, this is the one where the thing that killed her is something every single person watching has done. It's silly and stupid in hindsight, but sometimes we can't help but do it. It was May 12th, 2018, and the evening air above the French Quarter in New Orleans carried the overlapping sounds of brass bands, conversation, and kitchen exhaust fans pushing the smell of butter and cayenne out over the narrow streets, where wrought iron balconies overlooked the sidewalks below. Margot Delequa was 46 years old and worked as a freelance interior decorator in New Orleans, splitting her time between residential clients in the Garden District and the occasional commercial project. Friends and co-workers said she was pretty composed and careful about most things, but with one exception, Margot tilted chairs. She had been doing it since high school, rocking backward onto two legs at desks, dinner tables, bar stools, wherever she sat. Teachers warned her. Her ex-husband warned her. Her business partner literally went out and bought her a desk chair with a locking tilt thing specifically to get her to stop. And she kinda just kept doing it anyway, leaning back on phone calls, rocking at restaurant tables while she waited for food. Friends said it was as unconscious as crossing her legs. Every teacher you've ever had has said that, right? You'll crack your head open doing that. And I heard it growing up, and you probably did too. But she heard it for 30 years, and it never meant anything until one night it meant everything. That evening, Margot was at a dinner party on the third-floor rooftop terrace of a friend's building in the Marigny. The gathering was to celebrate a renovation Margot had just finished for her friend's ground-floor retail space, about a dozen guests on the open-air terrace. The terrace was tiled in smooth quarry tile and surrounded by an older wrought iron railing about 36 inches high. Metal bistro chairs and tables were arranged near the center, though a few chairs had drifted toward the railing as people moved around. Margot was sitting in a metal bistro chair about 2 feet from the terrace railing, facing inward toward the table, mid-conversation with wine in one hand. Multiple guests later confirmed what happened next. She tilted the chair back onto its 2 rear legs. One guest said he had seen her doing it at least twice during dinner, and nothing happened. But this time, the rear legs slid on the smooth tile, and the tilt just went past the balance point. Her lower back hit the top rail, and the rail caught her below her center of gravity. Her momentum carried her upper body over, the chair fell away, and one guest lunged forward and grabbed at her ankle but couldn't hold it. She fell 3 stories and hit the concrete courtyard below. People ran for the stairway while someone called emergency services from the terrace. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. Margot was unconscious with visible head trauma. She was transported to a nearby trauma center and pronounced dead within the hour. The medical examiner said the cause of death was catastrophic cranial trauma, with cervical spine fractures from a fall onto a hard surface. Investigators noted relatively little evidence that she had time to brace for impact. Every single person she ever sat next to told her the same thing, and she never listened. So how was she supposed to know this one random night would be any different? And honestly, I don't have a good answer for that. The building owner raised the railing to 42 inches and replaced the smooth tile with textured surface. Friends later said the rooftop was rarely used for gatherings after that. The renovation Margot completed was featured posthumously in a regional design publication with a brief dedication at the editor's request. I chose this last one as the closer because every other person in this video made a split-second decision that went wrong. This guy climbed inside a barrel, asked his friends to push, and had the whole ride down to think about it. It was November 14th, 2015, and the glow of a bonfire threw long, shifting shadows across a mowed clearing on a 40-acre cattle property outside Missoula, Montana, where about 15 people gathered in camp chairs and truck tailgates around the fire. Breath visible in the cold air and laughter carrying across the empty pasture into the dark tree line. Wyatt Krenshaw was 24 years old and had just finished his second season as a wildland firefighter on a hotshot crew based in western Montana. The bonfire was basically just an unofficial end-of-season hangout hosted by a crew member whose family owned the property. Wyatt was fit and compact, the kind of person who moved through physical space like nothing could surprise him. Crew members said he arm wrestled literally everyone at every gathering, regardless of size, and had once ridden a dirt bike standing on the seat across a fire camp clearing just to win a bet. He wasn't reckless on the job. Supervisors described him as disciplined on the line, but off the clock, his physical confidence just ran completely unchecked. Disciplined on the fire line, and then inside a barrel at a bonfire 4 months later. Like, try fitting those two things into the same person, because I've been trying and they just don't go together, but somehow they're both true. The barrel was a large wooden feed barrel reinforced with metal bands, roughly 3 feet tall and 2 feet across, sitting near the barn at the top of a grassy slope that ran about 60 yards downhill toward a tree line. Nobody could really agree later on who brought it up first, but crew members said Wyatt was already inside the barrel before anyone even properly suggested it. He crouched down with his arms hooked over the rim and told 2 friends to give him a push. They did. The barrel tipped forward onto its side with Wyatt inside and started rolling down the slope. For the first 20 feet or so, the speed was manageable. The group at the bonfire watched, and a few people were filming on their phones. The barrel tracked straight down the mowed strip, and Wyatt could be heard shouting. Crew members later said the sound was excited, not scared. Then the slope got steeper, and the barrel picked up speed, bouncing on uneven ground where the mowing missed a rut. The path shifted left away from the mowed strip into rougher pasture. By about 40 yards, it was going way faster than anyone expected, and people near the fire started standing up. 60 yards sounds like nothing, until you actually picture someone inside something rolling downhill for that long. I looked it up, and it's over half a football field, and every single foot of it was picking up speed. A partially buried tree stump sat at the base of the slope, invisible from the top in the dark. The barrel hit it at full speed. The sound carried all the way up to the bonfire, a heavy crack followed by splintering. The barrel broke apart into staves and bands. Wyatt's body came to rest beside the stump. He did not move. 3 crew members sprinted down. One of them, trained as a wilderness EMT, started checking him over. Wyatt was unresponsive with visible head injuries and irregular breathing. Emergency services arrived within 22 minutes. He was airlifted to a regional trauma center, where he died several hours later without ever regaining consciousness. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be severe traumatic brain injury with subdural hemorrhaging, along with chest trauma resulting in multiple broken ribs and a collapsed lung. Witnesses said the barrel was going too fast for anyone to catch by the time it hit, and the injuries were consistent with that kind of impact. The property owner cleared the stump and other obstructions from the slope. The crew held a memorial during the next season's training week. His helmet and fire pack were mounted in a glass case at the crew's base station, built by a crew member who had been at the bonfire that night.